Thanks for tuning into this episode of Welcome Disruption. We're joined by Jan Golden, founder of Age-Friendly Vibes, who is reframing our perceptions around aging using bold messaging and creative art in her greeting cards. You're going to want to stay tuned to learn more. Jan, thank you so much for being here with me today. I am so excited to welcome you to our podcast. Jan is the founder of Age-Friendly Vibes, and I would love to just kick us off with a little description from you of how that process came to life, and what it was that inspired you to tackle ageism.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I always love talking about age positivity, and my particular focus is making people feel better about getting older, because we're all getting older, right? And like, there's research, I'm sure you know, that proves that your mindset about aging impacts your longevity by up to 7.5 years. So that's just, for me, a big why and a big compelling reason. I live in Colorado and was fortunate enough to be involved with changing the narrative. Colorado with Janine Vandenberg early in the game. I think she's just reported celebrating her 7th anniversary of that campaign, which has been really life-changing for me and put me on a trajectory. And the reason it's important is that's what actually was the birth of my business, because there was an anti-ageist birthday card contest that was sponsored by Changing the Narrative during COVID, which is 4 years ago now. Do you believe that? I, during that time, like a lot of other people, had additional time on my hands and time to kind of play around, get a little creative. And I played around with, or first of all, I researched clever or funny birthday cards. And at the time, and it's still true, the amount of ageist cards, I call them the damn year old cards that were out there, and just caricatures of older adults with sagging body parts and just, really awful messaging around getting older. I decided right then and there I needed to do something about it. So I designed a few cards and put them up on Etsy, and I got a great response. And here I am today, with about 200 unique designs, all supporting older adults and age positivity. And my cards are in stores all across the country, including Paper Source and Barnes & Noble. And I'm in about 400 stores across the country, and I'm worldwide as well. So I've had a really good reception to my brand, which has been extremely motivating. So
that is so exciting. And at Adage Marketing Group, we talk about the power of the brand, but every brand needs a story, and the story behind yours is absolutely exceptional. And if I could just recap, 7.5 years can be added to someone's life if they change their perception of aging with a positive light. Did I catch that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think it makes sense to me because I'm in my early 60s. And I think when people get to around retirement age, my friends, family, they take kind of two paths. One is, I'm done with life. I'm going to sit the old classic rocking chair on the porch and just watch TV. Or this is the best time of my life. I'm going to see this as an opportunity to really do the things that I want to do in life and contribute and make even stronger, deeper connections. So the people that take that, don't blame age, and take that positive aspect of getting older as something to value, rather than those that complain about aches and pains, become more sedentary, have more health issues. I feel like there's a big divide. The best news is that it's reversible. So if you decide to become more optimistic and stop blaming age and taking steps along those lines, you can actually, reverse the effects of that longevity hit that you would take otherwise. So
it's interesting to me. So my mother was older when she had me, and so I've seen aging kind of from a different perspective. I remember she embraced turning 50, and she didn't have a problem with turning 60. And, as her health has changed, it's been a little bit different, but I do see that early perception of positive aging really impacted how I felt about myself, and looking at the future as the best is yet to come. But then as I got into my career in senior living almost 20 years ago now, I had the opportunity to see such vibrant, giving people that were still living their purpose. And I think that I try to share that message as throughout my life, obviously, with people that I meet who aren't familiar with senior living. And our market penetration rate for education is only like 11%, who really understand the senior living industry at all. And there's so much support and connection for people in those communities. And I see the value of it in them continuing to give. A lot of volunteerism, a lot of mentorships, and just community kind of organization is the output of those people who have really embraced aging and haven't seen retirement as an opportunity to slow down.
Right.
The idea of, the third act, or, what I've already got plans for what I'm going to do if I ever retire. And it's a give back opportunity as like a CASA or a court appointed special advocate. I can't imagine any other way of being, but I've also had the benefit of years of going into senior living communities and meeting some of the most exceptionally profoundly gifted and still giving people at 90s. Yes.
It's so inspiring when you encounter those types of people. There's more and more of them. The older, we're living longer, healthier, more interesting lives, and it's just a really exciting thing to be a part of. Part of the other focus for me is around the internalized ageism component, the thing that holds people back, and our culture just perpetuates these messages about, I call it decline, depression, and dementia, right, when you get older. And you see it in comedy skits, in advertising, and you see it in birthday cards. And that's a specific area that I aim to tackle, because there's two parts to that. One is that it's one of the places where it's socially acceptable to poke fun at getting older, right? So me and my bestie are going to all complain, about how old we are and how we got our aches and pains. But the problem with that is that when you got those negative messages, it's not just your bestie that's seeing that message. It's on the shelf in the grocery store, in the pharmacy, on the greeting card aisle. And what I like to say is that your hiring manager is seeing that. Your marketing executive is seeing that. It's just adding to that drip by drip narrative in our culture that getting old is something to dread. And so my mission is twofold, is to help your loved one feel better about getting older, to take advantage of those longevity benefits, but also to send a message to put more age positive messages out there in the world to counteract all the negativity that's out there. It's very motivating for me.
That is inspiring. I think that intergenerational friendships will really lend themselves to changing the narrative overall across generations. I think again, it's one of the things that we talk about with intergenerational programming, but when we look at, even within a community, those individuals who are most active, we often see as they either transition levels of care or even in their home transition into a community, they feel that loss or that lack of, I have a purpose. A lot of studies that I've been reading recently about retirement is that association, in my mind, has less to do with the fact that they're not at work, and more that there's been a loss of identity and or a loss of connection to what their purpose was. And so I think purpose finding is part of our later in life journey. I'm a big fan of Carl Jung and his evaluation on how we look at life in quarters. And but I think the narrative, changing the narrative, to use that term, overall, it helps to have friends of other generations.
Yes.
If I, and I have in the past made a comment that was ageist, maybe towards someone using the term boomer, and to have a friend of that age group say to me, that was hurtful. And I would like it if you wouldn't say that again. And being willing to hear that and changing that narrative. Now, this was an opportunity where everyone has to kind of be open to changing the way they talk and also the language that we allow.
Yes, I think that your story or your emphasis on leveraging all generations is beautiful, and it's something that I strive to do. And I have a story related to that, which is in the greeting card industry. When I first did my first show exhibiting at a trade show, a couple of the neighboring booths to mine were women. There's a really great, generous community of makers that support each other. There's enough room for everyone to succeed and all different types of cards to be present. And I'm setting up my booth with this, jokes about getting old and all my age positivity. And the two women to my right and left over the course of a few days were like, tell me more about this. They were probably women in their 30s. And when I mentioned, some of the longevity statistics around it and just sort of the purpose behind my brand, each one of them had what I call one of those damn year old cards in their collection on their wall. And they were like, I had no idea. Their brand was either supporting women, kind of had more of a feminist bend, or just spreading kindness and positivity, but they still thought it was okay to have a card that made fun of somebody getting older. So it was great to see. I think it was eye-opening to me in that they were just not aware. They're good, decent people focusing on kindness and having these cards that they created, because in our culture it seemed like, well, that's what people want, that's what people want to buy. So anyway, I think the big takeaway for me was it wasn't a hard sell. It was just here's something different, and here's why I'm presenting this different. So, and I think that translates really well into intergenerational relationships of any type in the workplace or in the senior living community or center like that. It's just taking down those stereotypes that we think of an older generation and actually being present with the person in front of you and finding ways to collaborate, connect, and work together is beautiful.
Absolutely. So when we use the term welcome disruption, there are times when you look at the trajectory of the advertising industry, for example, looking at some of the car ads and perfume ads from the 70s and 80s where, there was a lot of objectification. And there was a feminist movement that said that that's not how we want to be represented. And I actually had a class in college where they took those same ads and put a male model in the same position. And it was startling, the visual difference, because men aren't typically depicted that way. So we can, using media, truly change the perception around what's acceptable and what's unacceptable. And one of the ways that, again, we use the term welcome disruption because, yes, this is how it's been, but we need to adjust the status quo with consideration. And I think the way to do that is storytelling. Yeah. So you telling your story, being willing to share stories, it is such an important part of adjusting perception. And for me also, having the opportunity to look at the media that's out on Instagram right now or on, it's impressive, the shift in people who are willing to open up and say, let's discuss how we need to be more pro-aging, but also what capturing ageism looks like.
Right. Yeah, I have another great story that proves that ageism impacts everybody at all ages as well. I think you're highly aware of that. But I had a greeting card maker friend of mine. I live in Colorado. She lived back east, and she messaged me on Instagram and she said, "You're not going to believe this, but I was at a birthday party and the birthday recipient got one of your cards, and it said, the older you get, the more beautiful you are inside and out." And she's like, I immediately said, I know the person who made that card. So she was so excited. But she said the more fascinating part was it was celebrating her niece's 30th birthday. So the card, the more beautiful you are, the older you get, the more beautiful you are inside and out, was one that was revered for a woman turning 30 by all of her friends and family. And I thought that was such a sweet and powerful story and a big lesson, because sometimes when I create some of these messages, I think of I have this vision of this like older person just being delighted that, they're made, somebody maybe in their 80s or 90s. And I'm thinking, this is a woman in her 30s that can use that type of positive messaging around aging as well. So that's something to keep in mind too, from a cross-generational standpoint.
That is absolutely exceptional. That is such a great story.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you believe in terms of trends and opportunities that we have looking forward within the industry? How can we additionally spread this message and make people more aware and bring them on board with this movement to shift the narrative?
Right. And that's a great question. A lot of people in the work that I do a lot of work in pro-age advocacy, and I do a lot of work talking about ageist humor and just sort of ageism in pop culture. And people always ask, like, what can I do about it? And it feels a little harder to do something when you see an ad on TV or in a magazine, because it's like, where do I even start? But what you can do, of course, what I want everyone to do is to think about birthdays as an opportunity to spread age positivity. But I also have one side of my business that supports senior living communities, because when I was designing cards and messaging, I had this one that I loved, which is embrace the twinkle in your wrinkle. But that phrase isn't appropriate for a card. I wouldn't give you a card, Adrienne, and saying, embrace the twinkle in your wrinkle, happy birthday. You just wouldn't give that, but it is great as a sticker or a poster or as a statement to put out there in the world to remind people, to embrace their wrinkles, basically. And so it turns out there's a lot of phrases that I use in my greeting cards that can be adjusted and tweaked a little bit, that get out there in the world in the form of a button or a sticker or a poster that really reinforce the age positive messaging as well. And I think we need more of that. If you think of any social activist movement or group, between a feminist movement or a Black Lives Matter or any of the various, marginalized groups that have social activist movements, from an ageism standpoint, we need as big of a movement as all of those, because ageism impacts everybody across the board. And so far, it hasn't really picked up steam. You don't see people with their age pride stickers, and so I'm hoping to shift that as well and have more and more, get more and more people to just be proud to share the fact that they're excited about getting older, that they're proud of getting older, that getting older is none of the things that the stereotypes, present them to be. So.
Absolutely. So I think it was our activist energy that aligned us when we first spoke. I think it's really that. I've been volunteering since I was 15, and I'm a firm believer in grassroots activism. I think maybe that's a big part of why I went into marketing, because you really have, in my belief, you really have the ability to shift people's mindsets about things. If you educate them, if you inform them, if you give them those opportunities, experience and exposure is what I say, that we all need to be able to change our minds about something. And so for me, and a great example of in-life activism, growing up, my mother wore a white ghost pin that had gold writing on it. It was kind of hard to read. And it said, invisible handicap. And it was so that people asked her about neurodivergence, and she ran an adult support group for people with ADHD. Yeah. That was her mission, right? And so I loved that she had that opportunity, and I wanted to kind of carry that through. So I bought a pin as well, but my pin was a sword, and it has a ribbon on it that says fighting invisible battles. And I've had a lot of conversations about it.
Yeah.
And I think that we could absolutely, I love the idea of a twinkle in your wrinkle as a mirror decal.
Yeah.
There's a couple of your cards that I could totally see on a pin on my messenger bag. So I love that grassroots kind of approach, and having people who are comfortable and willing to, stand firm on the activist role of, we can change this narrative around ageism.
Right. I've been involved also in collaborating with Art Against Ageism, Meg Laporte in Jordan. I just love those folks. I've been involved with her since the start of my business about 4 years ago. And as a result, I created a poster called the Age Belief Manifesto that has, I don't know if you've seen that, but it has just these phrases. It's just age positive phrases in kind of an artful arrangement that can be effective poster size or as small as a postcard. And that's been extremely popular. I even put it on a tote bag, but the thing that I love to say about it is that you hang it on your wall and you just feel better about getting older automatically because you're every day you kind of see a little phrase that you can pull out of it. So that's a great example of artistic activism in place that's supporting age positivity. And I do a lot of that. I'm also heavily involved in the American Society on Aging. I'm part of their Agism and Culture Council, and I'm involved with Ageism Awareness Day. So in that work, I've done a lot of, buttons and pins and posters and helping to lift up organizations and get age positive messages out there for the masses. So it's very inspiring work. It's important work. And so it really aligns. I'm just having a ball doing this. So
you are living your mission in a way that I find just deeply, deeply inspiring. I am so grateful. I refer to tote bags as walking billboards, and I think that you're looking at every possible avenue, from informing and educating to that more grassroots approach. I love it. I mean, when I met Meg, our first conversation, I think we talked about Banksy for at least a good part of it. I believe that you can use art to change people's lives, and I think that we have a lot of empty wall space and fence space and outdoor space that we could be leveraging for murals, for installations, for opportunities to have experiential art in our communities that are supportive and reflective of the kind of messaging we want to see carried forward. So thank you so much for lighting this torch. Before we close up today, what is the best way for everyone in our audience to get in touch with you?
Well, I'm active on Instagram at Age Friendly Vibes, and also you can visit my website, agefriendlyvibes.com, to purchase any products. And I'm also very involved on LinkedIn. I think that's where you and I connected, Adrienne. And I love LinkedIn, especially the very active pro-age advocacy community there. And you'll find me under my name of Jan Golden. They're my brand there as well. But I actually like to speak and write and talk about ageism, everyday ageism that I see out there in the world. And so that's been a great place to connect with me as well on LinkedIn. So
we'll be following your journey. We thank you so much for your time, Jan.
All right. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care.
All right. Bye.